It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, Andrew Mountbatten, Windsor, summoned to Washington over his links to Jeffrey Epstein. Members of US Congress investigating the crimes of the paedophile financier have written to Andrew, requesting an interview and giving him 2 weeks to respond. That letter emerging just hours after Andrew was formally stripped of his prince title, after the King issued a centuries-old document to remove his appointments. Also ahead, more pressure on the Justice Secretary over the mistaken release of a convicted sex offender. David Lammy said he was not equipped with all of the detail when he chose not to tell MPs that Brahim Kadur-Sharif had been freed in error from Wandsworth Prison. The lawyer for the Southport attack victims' families tells Sky News they want to see the killer's parents in prison after listening to their evidence at the public inquiry. Sky News learns that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans were banned from their match against Aston Villa tonight because of hooliganism within their fan base and not because of threats to visiting Israelis. And what happened to Charlene Downes? I speak to actor and broadcaster Nicola Thorpe about her new podcast about the teenager's disappearance 22 years ago. Well, that's come and much more on the UK Tonight. Andrew Windsor has been summoned to Washington by politicians investigating the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein. In a letter to the former Duke of York, the US Congress requested an interview with him over his relationship with a convicted paedophile. The letter emerged just hours after the King formally removed Andrew's titles. Well, our royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills joins me now from Rio. And Rhiannon, a lot of developments happening today. It's worth taking us through them.
Yeah, and I think we have to start by saying that Prince William's been here for a few days now, and this is what him and I think the rest of the palace were hoping to avoid any new revelations or movement on the story around his Uncle Andrew. And then we have this letter dropping from that US Congress committee saying that they really want some answers from his Uncle Andrew. Now, the key things that you really need to know about it, this has come from the US Congress committee who are looking into those accusations against the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein and also what was happening with his sex trafficking operation. What they've said is that Andrew, because there's been well-documented accusations against him, ones which he denies, and also because of his long-standing friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, he may well have answers they need in terms of their investigations. It's a very long letter, but kind of three of the main things that I'd like to point out, really, is firstly, they point to an email from 2011 where Andrew talks about being in this together with Epstein. They also flag up the flight logs that show that Andrew was a passenger on Epstein's plane between 1999 and 2006, and also talk about financial records from Epstein that say massage for Andrew. Now, the other thing that they really want to talk to generally, they say they want to speak to anyone who may well have tried to intimidate any of Epstein's victims. And you might remember the book that's been recently released by Andrew's accuser, Virginia Giuffre, who sadly died from suicide back in April. But in that book, she actually accuses Andrew of trying to dig for dirt on her when she was making those allegations against her. Now, what's interesting is that the committee say, look, do this interview with us. It's going to be in the best interests of the victims. Andrew, however, legally doesn't necessarily have to do it. So then he's in this difficult position. Does he or doesn't he? Now, if he does, it could well open up more questions for him. If he doesn't, then, look, there's going to be more accusations that he is continuing to disrespect the victims. In some ways, the timings of this could not be any worse for the royal family. We're talking about them again today because his brother, the King, had to sign that document, the letters patent, officially kind of putting a line through the fact that he can ever be known as Prince Andrew or His Royal Highness. And as Prince William is here, he literally had just flown into Belém, just gone to that COP UN climate conference, due to deliver a keynote message, and this letter drops from the US Congress. So I think it shows that, as you said, the Congress have given them, 2 weeks. They've given Andrew 2 weeks to respond to this request. And therefore, look, it's just we're looking at more repercussions potentially for Andrew and also the rest of the royal family.
Interesting to see what the next steps are. As you said, Rhiannon, this is a request from US Congress rather than an order. Rhiannon Mills there with the latest from Rio de Janeiro tonight. 6 people have been arrested during protests in Birmingham. This is ahead of Aston Villa's match against Maccabi Tel Aviv. It comes after police told Sky News that they banned Maccabi fans from the match due to significant levels of hooliganism in their fan base, rather than, as originally thought, threats to visiting Israelis. Our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, joins me now from Villa Park. And there were some chaotic scenes a little earlier, Rob. Talk us through what's been going on.
Well, police trying to contain the situation, to keep it safe, to balance having protesters and football fans. And there are quite a few pro-Palestinian protests continuing as the game begins, but fans were trying to get their way through this very narrow street into the stadium, while police were obviously trying to deal with something that was becoming quite heated. Some frustration potentially from fans who just want to be here for the match, those who want to use the presence of Maccabi Tel Aviv to protest, exercising that right. And it's why there's been so much scrutiny on this police decision to say that there should be no fans of Maccabi allowed here. A decision that's attracted so much scrutiny, angering the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, seeing it as an entire group, the Israeli fans being excluded, particularly with the focus at the moment on concerns about anti-Semitism in the country as well. But the focus of the police has now been revealed for the first time, just how they reached the decision to ban Israeli fans. And they looked at an incident in Amsterdam last year when Maccabi played Ajax, and there was pockets of unrest caused by Maccabi fans. They faced attacks as well in Amsterdam, condemned as anti-Semitic, but West Midlands police said their intelligence from Dutch police was that there were hooligan elements of the Maccabi fan base, which meant this decision was necessary. So, while MPs have been demanding answers from West Midlands Police this week, I've got them from the Chief Superintendent, Tom Joyce.
I'm aware there's a lot of commentary around the threat to the fans being the reason for the decision. To be clear, that was not the primary driver. That was a consideration. We have intelligence and information that says that there is a section of Maccabi fans, not all Maccabi fans, but a section of them who engage in quite significant levels of hooliganism. What is probably quite unique in these circumstances is whereas often hooligans will clash with other hooligans and it will be contained within the football fan base. We've had examples where a section of Maccabi fans were targeting people not involved in football matches, and certainly we had an incident in Amsterdam last year which has informed some of our decision making. So it is exclusively a decision we made on the basis of the behaviour of a subsection of Maccabi fans, but all the reaction that could occur obviously form part of that as well.
It is a decision that has been characterised as excluding potential victims to be able to cope with the policing of this match. Maccabi Tel Aviv say that they are being unfairly maligned, that while there might be hooligan elements in their fan base, that is something many clubs are having to deal with. They do say there's a long road to go to tackle the racism amongst their fans, because we did see them in Amsterdam last year with the anti-Arab slogans being chanted. But as for things tonight here on the ground at Villa Park, very small pocket of pro-Israeli protests we have seen. Police indeed stopping one activist at least with an Israeli flag trying to get close to the pro-Palestinian protest, using the powers that they have additionally in place tonight to try to contain this situation. There are more than 700 officers from around 10 forces at least across the country have been brought in. A huge operation is for West Midlands Police. We don't normally see this at football matches in this country, but it just shows how concerned they're being about this potentially becoming a flashpoint, as they do allow, even as the game goes on, these pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli protests to continue. A match that some activists said should not have been allowed. They believe Israeli teams should be banned completely from European competitions. Activism that they have maintained as this peace deal is in place between Israel and Hamas. And the hope will be that through the night that things stay as they are now, which seemingly are calm while pretty tense. But obviously the fans have got to leave while the protests do continue.
Rob, thank you. Rob Harris for the latest there from Villa Park. We'll keep across the situation there throughout the course of the evening here on Sky News. Now, the Justice Secretary has announced new measures to crack down on mistaken releases from prison as the pressure on him grows over the release of a convicted sex offender. David Lammy has defended his performance in the Commons yesterday, saying he hadn't been equipped with all the details when questioned by MPs about that error. And tonight, the Prime Minister backed Mr Lammy, saying he was setting out the facts to the best of his knowledge. Police are still urgently searching for the Algerian national and registered sex offender released in error from Wandsworth Prison last week. Our national correspondent Tom Parmenter has this next report.
A rare moment at Wandsworth Jail. A prisoner going back inside. Fraudster Billy Smith, who was released by mistake on Monday, handed himself back in to prison staff. One manhunt over, another still ongoing. The Met Police searching for 24-year-old Algerian sex offender Brahim Kadour Sharif, also released in error from HMP Wandsworth. Outside the gates, we met Yunus, who'd just been released himself, having served 5 months inside.
Seems there are problems in the system.
Yeah, I think there is problem in the system. Yeah, because if that happened in Chelmsford and then 2 days after it's happening here, what do you think? The system is they need to check something. They need help maybe. They need new prison. They need to fix a lot of things because now the world is changed, you know.
In a letter, the Prison Governors Association peeled back the layers of problems that have been accumulating for years. They said made worse by austerity.
They said that these mistaken releases are all wrapped up in underinvestment, overcrowding and archaic technology. Some prisons are still using fax machines and relying on pen and paper. The Prison Governors Association were clear. They said the conditions just don't exist to reduce the number of these errors to zero.
It's why the government ordered an urgent prison governors meeting to clamp down on these mistakes, which are infuriating the public and putting the Justice Secretary under enormous pressure.
The rate of release by error is too high. It has to come down. This is a paper-based system that obviously involves human error. We had 800 errors under the last government. This has now gone on for a generation. Our prison system is in crisis.
His reputation and that of the government is on the line.
Well, let me just say how angry and frustrated I am that these mistakes have been made in releasing people. They're intolerable and they shouldn't be made. A lot of it comes from the burden and the strain on the system because of the failures of the last government. But I recognise it's our job to step up and to fix this, and we will.
Labour blame the Conservatives. The Conservatives say this is on Labour's watch.
What we have seen now is an explosion in accidental prisoner releases, many of them foreign criminals, many of them sex offenders. This should not be happening. We know that there will always be times when mistakes occur, but the scale at which it is happening is causing real worry.
But these are not just mistakes. In the case of the Algerian sex offender who is still on the run, it took 6 days for the prison service to realise he was missing and alert the police. It is incompetence that puts the public at unnecessary risk. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, South West London.
Well, Tom joins us now from outside Wandsworth Prison. He's been there since that news broke. And our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is following events in Westminster. Tom, I'll come to you first. What more do we know this evening?
Well, the word mistake really does diminish what's been going on here. These are serious errors that are putting the public at risk because that Algerian sex offender is still at risk. He has a complicated backstory of offending. And the Metropolitan Police have been put in the really difficult position of having 6 days to try and catch up on his whereabouts because so bad were the communications within the prison that they didn't realise for 6 days that he was actually missing, that he'd been let out by these kinds of errors that we see cropping up at different prisons. But of course, the spotlight is on what's happening at the moment within the prison service, so those incidents are amplified, but I'm sure there are many more dangerous offenders, more dangerous perhaps than the ones that are currently at large who have been released in previous months. The manhunt is continuing to try and locate that individual, and there have been no further details shared by the police today as any possible sightings or any further information about him. But it is clearly a source of great frustration that they've had a 6-day period that they're trying to catch up on. He could be anywhere. There's no saying that he's in London. He could be far further afield by now. And the other more fundamental problem within all this is, what are prisons for? Well, they're for punishing people and to rehabilitate people. And the conditions that we've outlined in that report and that everyone knows are within the prison estate mean that people just aren't being rehabilitated at all. If anything, it is making offenders more likely to reoffend when they are let out into the community, whether that's by mistake or whether it's at the point at which their time has come and their sentence has been served. The whole situation is a mess, and politicians, as we've heard, blaming each other.
Yeah, well, let's bring in the political element, shall we? Tom, thank you very much. John, what are the government doing this evening? We have heard from the Prime Minister and the Justice Secretary, but this problem isn't going away.
Well, the Justice Secretary, Mr Lammy, has, in the last hour or so, made another announcement as to what he's doing to try and make sure this sort of thing doesn't happen again. He has told us that he had a meeting when he was up at that prison in Gartrey in Leicestershire, that he met 11 governors from prisons across the country, and that they have agreed that they're going to set up a specialist team of engineers and analysts and designers which will be deployed to roll out cutting-edge technology, the government says, to more prisons, reducing human error, modernising the archaic processes that have led to mistakes. And Mr Lammy says this will build on the new checks that he brought in last month. That was on the 27th of October, when he made his statement in the Commons about Hadush Kebatu. He got his dates mixed up when he spoke earlier on today, when he said that the mistakes for this latest mistake were before that announcement. Well, in fact, his announcement was the 27th, that mistake was the 29th. But Mr Lammy has said tonight, I'm sending in crack teams to deal with some of the technology issues we're seeing, because this is a paper-based system. And so he is desperately trying to salvage a bad situation. Of course, there's one person still at large. Mr Lammy is in deep political trouble. Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, has said tonight, in Calamity Lammy's last 24 hours, he's refused to explain himself in Parliament as he feared career suicide. Now, that was a report last night suggested that's why he didn't go back to the House of Commons when he knew more after his very accident-prone performance at Prime Minister's questions. And he's refused to say how many prisoners have been let out mistakenly, how many are still at large, and created more confusion by getting the timeline of events wrong. When he was speaking at Gartrey earlier, he also confused matters more by saying he didn't know what had happened with this latest release until Wednesday morning, the morning of Prime Minister's questions. Well, yesterday we were told he knew the night before. He talked about how he'd been preparing for Prime Minister's questions. He'd been in his office, whereas in Parliament on Wednesday, yesterday at PMQs, he said he'd been out to buy a new suit because his godmother had been going to watch PMQs in the gallery. So Mr Lammy has got himself into a terrible muddle. Whilst there was some backing for him from the Prime Minister, and Prime Minister, we heard, express his anger at what had happened, when PM was asked about the confusing messages and confusing statements by Mr Lammy, the PM said rather curtly, well, Mr Lammy will speak for himself.
I think everything's a bit all over the place when it comes to this issue, isn't it, John? Thank you, John Craig there in Westminster. But let's talk about this subject in a bit more detail now. I'm joined by John Podmore, former Governor of Belmarsh and Brixton Prisons and author of Out of Sight, Out of Mind, Why Britain's Prisons Are Failing. John, really good to have you on the show tonight. You'll have been listening there to Tom Parmenter and John Craig talk about these recent events. I mean, we've pointed out on Sky News over the last 48 hours that mistakenly releasing prisoners isn't new. It's been going on for years. It has doubled in the last year under this government. But what is your assessment of this current problem and how it's being framed?
Well, I have to say I'm beginning to feel a little bit sorry for David Lammy, because he's no better or worse than his predecessors, be that Shabana Mahmood, who escaped, shall we say, Alex Chalk in the previous government. He's beginning to realise that, he wants to pull some levers, and then all of a sudden he realised those levers aren't connected to anything. He's been utterly humiliated by his senior officials in the prison and probation service. You know, these officials who continually promoted, they're unaccountable, they're secretive, and you know they get away with it. Now, what you know, I'm not calling for David Lammy to resign. The last thing we want is yet another Secretary of State for Justice. I've lost count. It's kind of one a year. Same with prisons and probation ministers. He just needs to go. He needs to get on with his job. And what he should be doing today and tomorrow is having, you know, what we used to call as some career talks with senior officials. This is not about resources. It's not about overcrowding. It's about an unaccountable set of managers that he and Shabana Mahmood and Alex Chalk and all the others did nothing other than promote and reward for failure. You know, it's not David Lammy's job to you know, micromanage and run the prison system. It's for him to set the budget, to set the strategy, to set the policy, and then to employ people to deliver on that. And he's failed, and Shabana Mahmood failed, and Alex Chalk failed to appoint the right people in the right posts and hold them to accountable. So
yeah, it's really interesting there when you talk about accountability. You know, if you were the governor of HMP Wandsworth, what would you be doing right now? Because we have heard from the Justice Secretary, and you said there, it's interesting, you feel sorry for him because, you know, as soon as that high-profile Hadish Kabatu, the Epping Forest sex offender, was released mistakenly, he said, look, we're going to have in tougher measures, tougher checks, this won't happen again. He said it again today, but it doesn't seem to be happening. If you were the governor of HMP Wandsworth, what would you be doing right now?
Well, you know, I'd be exercising some leadership. I'd be walking round the prison, you know, 7 days a week, you know, long hours, and I'd be talking to my staff, and I'd be managing and motivating them, and saying that we have a job to do here. You know, we are here to protect the public. It's important. It's difficult, but we can do it. You know, and you know, I don't know the governor of Wandsworth, you know, but I know there are good governors out there for whom that is their philosophy, and they want to do that. You know,
but what about when the staff push back and go, look, there's not enough of us, you know, staff are not turning up, we're really stretched. You know, we've heard there that there is no IT system for prisoner release, which, you know, is perhaps the most jaw-dropping revelation, and then there has been many over the last 48 hours. It's all done on pen and paper, and when you're figuring out how many days a prisoner's got left, it's literally somebody jotting it down with a pen on a bit of paper and often getting their sums wrong.
Well, yes. I mean, I was a junior governor in the 1980s, and that's the way we did it. You know,
and we're still doing it now.
And it hasn't changed. But why hasn't it changed? You know, it hasn't changed because, you know, ministers are distracted, and ministers change like you and I change our socks, and they're not interested, they're not motivated. You know, sadly, you know, most ministers are interested in the next job, not doing the job that they've got. But ultimately, it's having the senior officials. And, you know, whilst there's been no continuity of ministers, there's been continuity of senior leaders. You know, they're secretive and they're self-serving, but ultimately they're not held to account. Yes, it's an archaic, it's not even analog. You know, as you say, it's paper and pen and
so how do we break the cycle? Because I'm conscious we could talk to you all evening about this. There's so much to cover. I mean, it's, you know, it's the court system, it's the probation service, you know, the whole sector is in a right mess. But how do you break the cycle? How do you change the pattern? You've been in the sector for over 40 years. And as you said, ministers and secretaries have come and gone, prime ministers. Yet we find ourselves having the same discussion about a broken prison system. How do you break that pattern?
Well, politicians have a lot to answer for. If we go back to, I don't know, before last, there was a manifesto commitment, and it was in the Queen's speech, to have a royal commission on criminal justice. It's the criminal justice system. You know, the Ministry of Justice is responsible for prisons and probation and the courts, and there is no element of that is working. It didn't stop the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Justice getting promoted to the Home Office to sort out the chaos in the Home Office. That's the way it works. It's kind of yes, Minister, and the thick of it. This government, before it was elected, in its manifesto, it said, we will look at the way in which probation is managed. It's now reneged on that. All parties of all persuasions have not got the political bravery to tackle this properly. All they want to do is assuage the tabloids, assuage the social media by being tough on crime. And by being tough on crime, they think it's about locking up more and more people and building more and more prisons. It isn't working, and one of the things that this debacle relieves
the early release scheme
at the moment is the way in which we release prisoners. We are very good at locking people up, and that's why we've got a problem. What we're not good is letting people out.
What comes afterwards is
what comes afterwards
is the unknown, it seems,
13...
for those working in it and those being released. John, we have run out of time. I know that we will speak about this again. As you said, this problem is huge and it hasn't been tackled properly, so we've got plenty more to discuss. But for now, John Podmore, former prison governor and author, thank you so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
As to come on the UK tonight, the families of the Southport victims say that they want to see the killer's parents in prison. We'll have the latest from the public inquiry. Also ahead, what happened to missing Charlene Downes? We'll be speaking to actor and broadcaster Nicola Thorne about her new podcast. And tributes tonight to the Shirley Valentine actor Pauline Collins, who has died at the age of 85.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the polls affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
What country are you
from? The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
The lawyer for the Southport attack victims' families has told Sky News that they want to see the killer's parents in prison. This is after listening to their evidence at the public inquiry. The mother of Axel Rudikabana said today that she is profoundly sorry for the family's failure to stop their son. While his father told the inquiry he regrets not informing the police his son had bought a machete a year before the attack. Sky's Katie Barnfield has this report.
Well, there was anger earlier from the families of the three little girls who were killed in the Southport attack last year towards their killer, Axel Ruda-Cabana's parents, for what they said were failures to stop him. They were speaking after his parents gave evidence to the attack inquiry, painting a picture of their son as a violent, unpredictable teenager over whom they had completely lost control. The families of the girls said they felt compelled to speak out, accusing them of completely failing as parents and calling their actions disturbing and shameful. Their lawyer told Sky News that they would even like to see his parents go to jail.
There needs to be criminal sanctions. There has to be an element of parental responsibility. The abject failure of parental control is jaw-dropping in its absence. In the context of what was going on, in the context he was trying to stab his father the preceding week, in the context that they were fearful for their lives, in the context in the previous week he was trying to go to the Range High School with a jerry can of petrol and a knife. To not call the police, in my mind, requires criminal sanctions. It's not entirely clear whether there is any criminal sanction that can be imposed. In the context of if my children don't go to school, I can be prosecuted. But if my children leave the house intending to cause mass murder, I can't. Now, that cannot be right. That has got to be something for phase 2 of the inquiry, and we'll be making representations in that regard.
When you say criminal sanctions, do you mean that the families would like to see his parents go to jail?
They would like them both to go to jail. The abdication of parental responsibility, given the known threat that he posed to the rest of the world, in my view, is criminal.
Well, we heard earlier from both Axel Ruda-Cabana's father, Alphonse, and his mum, Letitia. Alphonse called his son a monster and said he deeply regrets not doing more to stop him, like failing to confront him about weapons, including a machete that he had delivered to the family home. He also admitted he didn't call the police a week before the attack when he stopped his son getting a taxi back to his former school, believing he was going to carry out an arson attack. He said his son threatened him with a knife and said, next time you stop me, there will be consequences. His mum, Letitia, opened her evidence with a statement directly addressing the victims' families, saying they were heartbroken and for our failures, we are truly sorry. She then said they didn't report Axel because they were afraid he would be taken into care or even arrested. Both of his parents broke down in tears as they were giving evidence. His father, Alphonse, said he was so sorry to the victims of the three girls for failing to protect their little angels. And this phase of the inquiry has now drawn to a close, and the inquiry chair said he hoped that at least the families have now got some answers.
Still to come on the UK Tonight, I speak to actor and broadcaster Nicola Thorpe about her new podcast looking into the disappearance of Charlene Downes 22 years ago. My next guest tonight is looking into Lancashire Police's longest unsolved murder investigation. Charlene Downes was just 14 when she disappeared on a Saturday night in Blackpool in 2003. 22 years later, and the mystery of her disappearance remains unsolved. Despite a number of arrests, 2 trials, and an offer of £100,000 in reward money, Charlene has never been found and is presumed murdered. Well, her story is now the subject of a new podcast hosted by actor and broadcaster and Blackpool native Nicola Thorpe, who joins me in the studio now. Nicola, really good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
The podcast went live last week, which is the 22nd anniversary of Charlene rather going missing. Why this case? Why did you want to revisit this? As I said, it's over 2 decades old.
It's still not been solved. I'm from Blackpool. I was a teenager myself when Charlene went missing. I remember the missing person posters going up around town. And I remember stories of how she'd met her demise, the rumours, the urban myths going around town, and sort of these warnings to stay away from certain areas because that's where bad things happen to young girls. And I revisited the story after a chance conversation with an old school friend where we said, do you remember that girl? And we couldn't remember her name because she was known by this awful nickname, Kebab Girl. Because at the time, the police had told us, it was the police's official theory of what had happened to her, that she had been killed by 2 takeaway workers in Blackpool town centre and her body disposed of by turning it into kebab meat.
I remember it. I remember the urban legend. It was the scare story for young girls about going out at night.
And it's hugely graphic. And me and my friends we couldn't decide whether or not it was true. And we Googled it and got our phones out and lo and behold, there it was, Kebab Girl, Charlene Downes. But then you dig a little bit deeper and you realise that actually that theory was a police theory. It wasn't just an urban myth. It was the prosecution's official theory of what happened to her. And I wanted to know more and I wanted to understand the truth about what had happened to Charlene. Not just that, but also the lies surrounding her case. And I discovered that actually the kebab story, completely untrue.
Yeah, but it still is part of that urban legend. It's still readily available online, and when people mention that, they think of this young girl. And you know what I thought was interesting about your podcast is that it has so many themes relevant to today. Girls, women literally being treated like pieces of meat. It's fair to say that this case, you've seen it differently through a more current lens, a sort of 2025 lens. We talk so much more about violence against women and girls, racism, class, and grooming. I'm not even sure that term grooming was said, let alone understood, back in 2003 when Charlene went missing.
No, certainly not. And the police officers, I've read police reports and press reports from the time where officers and journalists refer to these girls as prostitutes, child prostitutes. Obviously, there's no such thing as a child prostitute, just a victim of child sexual exploitation. But it was kind of presumed because these girls, now women, many women who I've spoken to for the podcast, because they were in relationships with these men or because they sought the company of men.
Because there was a certain alleyway in Blackpool where it's known that Charlene and some of her school friends would hang around and make friends with men who worked in these takeaway shops.
Yeah, and not always much older, sometimes men in their 20s, but still, they were children. They were under 16, they were under 18. But because they'd struck up a conversation and a friendship and then perhaps were given food in exchange for the unthinkable. But the women that I've spoken to who are now like me, mothers in their 30s, they say, I never saw it as grooming at the time because for me it was somebody showing me affection, or what they deemed to be affection, at least initially. Obviously, we then know what went on to happen, but...
And then a lot of them didn't speak to the police in the original investigation. It's only now, again, because grooming is in the headlines. People know what it is now. They've seen what happened in Blackpool back in 2003 and can see what's happening today, and they've made the link and they feel brave enough to come forward. And also, they weren't treated perhaps as they should have been during a police investigation. As you mentioned, being called child prostitutes.
Yeah.
The fear of coming forward.
I spoke to women who, when they were girls, they were dismissed by police. They were told that it was their fault, that they were mixing in with the wrong crowd, or some girls who were interviewed with parents there. Now, for a lot of these girls, perhaps they wouldn't be able to be completely open about the sort of behaviour that they've been subjected to with a parent there in the room. But it really isn't my hope that 22 years on, with a modern lens on this case, it's those women that I want to come forward and speak to, either police or me directly, because we need to paint a fuller picture of what happened to Charlene on that evening.
Yeah, because she was involved in that in some capacity. We don't know to what, because, of course, we can't talk to Charlene, and she didn't talk to her family about it. You've had some accounts from friends of hers at the time, and we don't ultimately know if her being groomed or having, you know, being sexually exploited by strangers, essentially, had anything to do with
her murder or her disappearance.
Yeah, exactly. But it is presumed a murder by police. Yeah. In terms of, well, it's the name of your podcast, Somebody Knows Something. Yeah. Is this what you want the podcast to be? A call to action for people to, again, look at this through a modern lens and feel brave enough to come forward?
Absolutely. I wouldn't have ever made this podcast if it was just about telling a morbid, horrific story.
Well, even when you were trying to get this podcast made, people were saying to you, no more dead women. No more dead women.
People don't want to hear stories about dead women.
That's the reality of life, unfortunately.
Yeah, women are being killed at an extortionate rate, and this is a little girl here who's gone missing over 22 years. But it's my belief, and it's also the police's belief, that there is somebody out there who knows what happened to her. We know that she wasn't just being abused by men at the takeaways. We also know that there were men who had access to her home, family, friends, who she was subjected to abuse by. There was also a witness who came forward during the course of my investigation that suggests that there was a grooming hub elsewhere in Blackpool that Charlene was frequenting as well at the time. I need those women or other witnesses to come forward and speak and try and give that fuller picture of Charlene's life and ultimately possibly her death.
And as part of this podcast, you've had cooperation from the police, from Charlene's friends and from her family as well. How do her family feel about you putting this back out and into the forefront of the public's mind?
It's quite tricky with the family because they have been under a cloud of suspicion themselves, not necessarily to do with her disappearance, but because...
It's the rumour and speculation that comes with a case like this.
Yeah, and the friends of the family that were given access to Charlene's home. Now, they would deny that they ever knew that the men who were coming into their home were paedophiles, but we now know that that was true. Whenever this gets brought up again, I think it's twofold for them. On one hand, they're grateful that it could lead to somebody coming forward, but at the same time, it brings up a lot of trolling for them. I've spoken to them this week and they faced a lot of criticism and trolling from people who perhaps haven't had a full picture of the story. But yeah, at any opportunity, they do want people to be reminded of what happened to Charlene and for that further information to come forward.
Well, this is 22 years on, an ongoing police investigation. You're shining new light on it, Nicola, because of your connections to Blackpool. And I suppose the thought that, you know, you're from different sides of the tracks, essentially, you and Charlene, and if you'd have gone missing at 14, you feel that perhaps...
Maybe they would have treated it differently. I don't know. And I feel that sense of responsibility to Charlene. We never met, but we grew up a mile apart. We would have been the same year at school. And I feel a responsibility where others perhaps have failed to try and keep her name alive and really try and get justice for this poor girl.
Well, Nicola, thank you for coming in to talk to us about Charlene Downes. Nicola Thorpe, host of Charlene, Somebody Knows Something, the podcast that's available wherever you get your podcast from. Nicola, thank you so much.
Thank you.
In response to this story, we've had this from Lancashire Police. They said that this investigation remains open and we would encourage anyone with new and relevant information to come forward. News reaching us today that the Shirley Valentine actor Pauline Collins has died at the age of 85. Her family say she died in her care home in London, surrounded by loved ones, after living with Parkinson's for a number of years. One of her first roles was as a maid in Upstairs Downstairs. She was then the star of the one-woman play Shirley Valentine in London and on Broadway in the late 80s, before winning a BAFTA and getting an Oscar nomination for the film version in 1989.
Why do we get all this life if we don't ever use it? Why do we get all these feelings and dreams and hopes if we don't ever use them? That's where Shirley Valentine disappeared to. She got lost in all this unused life.
Still to come on the UK Tonight. Actor Eddie Marsen tells Sky News he's fed up seeing posh boys playing gangsters. And on the way, action from the Europa League, where it was a disappointing night for Martin O'Neill and Celtic.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live. Joins us live all in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes.
This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna.
We are in the heart of Nairobi, and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Durman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
They call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
Hello, welcome back. Coming up, we're going to hear from the actor Eddie Marsen as he calls for more support for working class people in the TV and film industry. He's been talking to our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer. That's on the way. But first, David is here with the sport. OK, we're going to start with Wolves' search for a new manager. Bring me up to date.
OK, so they are after the Middlesbrough boss, Rob Edwards.
OK.
However, their approach for him has been rejected. Middlesbrough are denying them permission to...
He's already got a job.
He's already got a job. He's doing very well at this job. He's third in the Championship right now. But he does have strong links with Wolves because he actually played for the club back in the 2000s. He coached their under-18s, then coached in the setup for the first team, was even interim coach for Wolves' first team for a while. He was asked about this because Vitor Pereira's been sacked after their worst start to a league season ever, 2 points from the first 10 games. And he said, I love being Middlesbrough manager, that's what I want to think about. All I can say is I've not given it a single thought because my focus is just on this. It's all the stuff that my daughter was telling me about. That's basically his daughter found out that he'd been linked with the Wolves job. He wasn't even aware. So as it stands right now, Wolves really want Rob Edwards, but Middlesbrough are saying no chance right now.
OK, so if they don't get their number one pick, oh gosh, nobody wants to be the runner-up, the second choice, do they? But that's just how it works, isn't it? Who else is in the running for?
Do you know some really intriguing names? Eric Ten Hag.
Oh.
Yeah, right. Eric Ten Hag, who was sacked as Manchester United boss in the summer, and then remember that he was appointed at Bayer Leverkusen. But then was removed after 2 games in charge. It was not working at all, and they just decided to cut their losses very, very quickly. But he is the next, after Rob Edwards. Brendan Rodgers, ex-Leicester, and obviously was Celtic manager until very recently, but left that post
He
in...
won't get a good reference from
utter,
Celtic.
well, right, exactly. In utter acrimony and, you know, the strains with the board. And Robbie Keane's an interesting one. Played for Wolves, has had some coaching experience in the last few years, Maccabi Tel Aviv in Israel and Ferencváros in Hungary. But it's clear the man they really want, and they're hoping to be able to persuade Middlesbrough, and that is
That's a
Rob
really
Edwards.
wide range of people,
Isn't it
with
just?
really different personalities and skill sets.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, we'll keep an eye on that one, because Wolves, as I mentioned before, in such a difficult situation, just 2 points from the first 30 on offer in the Premier League. Right, let's bring you up to date with the European action this evening.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Sky Mobile sponsors the transfer window on Sky Sports News.
Right.
Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank was all smiles with his teammates today, but his future still seems somewhat uncertain.
Honest, I'm just sick and tired of this.
The number that was put before me was 50% more than our highest paid player at the time.
Jimmy had the feeling, do they really want me here?
My determination was not to sell Jimmy to that particular club.
It made me look bad in front of the fans. It was not necessary.
The biggest single challenge is how we managed his exit publicly, which probably Jimmy didn't like very much.
He's settling into his new surrounds. The player renamed Judas Floyd Money in the Bank when he was drummed out of Ellen Road.
Don't believe the figures at all. Don't believe the figures at all.
Reading the text last night, that was nothing about money from his agent. Well, Jesus, lads, honestly.
I just think he's greedy.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Actor Eddie Marsan says it's harder than ever for working-class people to break into the film and TV industry. The 57-year-old told Sky News that performers now need the backing of the bank of mummy and daddy to reach the big time. He's been speaking to our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer.
If you want to be an actor in this country and you come from a disadvantaged background, you have to be exceptional to have a hope of a career. If you come from a privileged background, you can be mediocre. There's been a fashion that it's been posh boys. It's even now to the point where even like gangster movies now, 30, 40 years ago, you would have The Long Good Friday, you would have Get Carter, where people like Michael Caine or Bob Hoskins, who were real working class actors, were playing those parts. Now you have posh boys playing working class characters.
You are now officially one of the vice presidents of Mountview, alongside the two dames, Dame Judy and Dame Elaine Page.
Yes.
I mean, it's good company for starters.
It is. The Christmas parties are fantastic. The two dames, they get so half-cut, honestly. We have to get an Uber, get them home. They're terrible. No, I'm joking.
Why did you want to accept this role? Why was it important to you?
I came to Mountview when I was 20. I was serving an apprenticeship as a printer, and they were kind enough to give me a place. There were no kind of grants then, so for the first year, a East End bookmaker paid for my fees, and then my mum and him got together and paid the second year, and Mountview gave me a grant, a scholarship for the third year. So I owe them everything, really.
We know you as one of this country's finest character actors. Could it have been very different then had you not had that early support?
Yes, 100. I was a bit lost, to be honest.
There was a 2024 Creative Industries Policy and Evidence Centre report that found 8% of British actors come from working class backgrounds compared to 20% in the 70s and 80s. What do you make of that? Why is it getting worse?
When I went to America and I did 21 Grams and Vera Drake, I remember thinking, I'm great, I'm going to have a career now. And I wasn't the idea of what Britain was selling of itself.
Is the truth you have to sort of try twice as hard and almost bankrupt yourself then to get to the same position as people?
Yeah. Now, in order to become an actor, you have to have the bank of mummy and daddy to bankroll you for those 7 or 8 years when you're not going to earn a living.
Is it more subtle than we think, the problem, or is it...
I tell you what I find really interesting. I've been an actor for 34 years. And I remember for the first 20 years going on a set, and very rarely within the crew and within the cast would you see a black face. Very rarely. And within the last 5 or 6 years, there's been more of an effort to include people of colour. I've done Supercell with Ratman now, and it's brilliant because half of the crew are people of colour. They're from the Afro-Caribbean community, and the story is based on that. When you have people like Lawrence Fox and complaining that this is unfair, I never heard them complain it was unfair when you never saw a blackface. Never once did they say anything when it was unfair. Now that people are trying to address it, they think it's unfair. And the reason they think it's unfair is because they're scared of a level playing field.
And now more than ever, does it feel more important for you to be banging that drum?
I mean, look, social media is destroying political and cultural discourse. It's making people become very binary. Acting and drama is an exercise in empathy. And if there's one thing that we need more of at the moment, it's more empathy.
What a brilliant interview. Right, let's have a quick look at the weather before we go. The next few days bringing some rain, but there will be dry and brighter interludes. Many places looking mild, dry and calm this evening. Isolated showery outbreaks, though, mainly for the west. A few showers around overnight, while southeast England and the southwest of Ireland will be at more risk of rain. That's all from the UK tonight. The programme returns on Monday night at 8 o'clock. Up next is The World.